Welcome into the Legislative Lounge. I'm your host, Natebige, along with my co-host, Professor Mike. And tonight, we want to bring to you guys a little bit of what's been on our minds and on a lot of people's minds across America is governmental overreach. It's a problem that we're dealing with on a daily basis at all levels of the American legislative and our executive branches, like our police and whatnot. So there's a couple items that we've been noticing going on as of lately from a federal standpoint that we want to go through real quick. And honestly, I don't think tonight's going to be a long live, but we want to start preparing you guys for the election that's coming up in just 8 days now, 7 days as of tomorrow. It'll be 1 week. And what we're going to be doing tonight is going over that. But then on Friday, what we want to give you guys is a breakdown of Agenda 47. And because I know a lot of people have been asking us, can you go into a little bit of the tariffs? Can you go into this about what Donald Trump's proposing? So we're going to do a special Agenda 47 breakdown on Friday. So definitely tune into that. But on election eve, Monday, which is our normal casting, it's going to be a election eve special for you guys, and we were working on a few special guests, which we hope to later tonight announce who those are. But it's going to be a good one with a lot of big names from social media, and a lot of them are actually doing a lot of political work right now in the real world. But stay tuned for that. Tonight, I'm going to let Professor Mike just dive into what we're going to be talking about tonight and go from there.
Yeah, so one of the big topics that always gets brought up in political spheres is Second Amendment. And the most important thing to think about when we talk about these topics is the actual wording when it comes to these amendments. So we're going to take a look at the Second Amendment, and it will be here. So when we look at this, we have to remember our grammar from school and how commas connect different ideas. So when we read a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, right? Those are two connecting ideas. So militia or army is necessary to the security of a free state, the security of our union of individual nation states, right? And then the other connecting idea here is the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And when we look at that, we have to understand that shall not be infringed. Shall means cannot be done. And we both know that there are over 20,000 gun laws on the books regulating firearms, regulating how they're sold and manipulated in commerce, 20,000 of these. And a lot of people attribute the word arms to firearms. But arms, by Supreme Court law, means any object that someone uses for their defense.
So are you telling me, Professor Mike, that when you're looking at this constitutional amendment, the Second Amendment, when it's referring to a well-regulated militia, a lot of people on the left like to say, it's still in connection with the arms, that it needs to be regulated. Are those two? How are those different?
So a well-regulated militia, by the description given to us by Alexander Hamilton in Federalist Paper 29, is essentially a trained group of citizens.
So they don't need any kind of like formal military training or anything of like, they don't need a license. It's just somebody that knows how to work a gun, correct?
They don't even
an arm.
So when it comes to owning arms, you don't have to technically be trained or anything like that. But when it comes to the militia, right? The militia is described very carefully in this. So here you can see this Federalist Paper 29, written January 9th, 1788, before the United States Constitution was even ratified. So this is talking to the people of the state of New York about the power of regulating the militia and commanding its services in times of insurrection and invasion. right?
And this is written by one of the founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, correct?
Yes, sir. You can see that right there on the right-hand side. Authors, Alexander Hamilton. And so the militia requires no skill in the science of war to discern the uniformity in the organization and the discipline of the militia, right? So when we talk about these things, the reason people call for so much regulation is out of fear. And the reason there's so much fear is because we've kind of turned firearms into a taboo. And you can see that in the most restrictive states, California, New York, Maryland, Connecticut, all, even Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah.
Right. So all of these areas have incredibly strict firearm laws, where it's almost impossible to defend yourself in the event that you would need to with a firearm. And what you see there coinciding with the super restrictive firearm laws is rampant crime.
Especially gun in the state of in the state of Illinois, specifically in Chicago, has been deemed as one of the most restrictive gun areas in the country. But yet they actually have the highest crimes of gun related crimes. So I find it funny that there are so many people that want to continuously talk about how they we need more regulation. But I mean, like, who in reality, when we look at those regulations, who is it regulating? Is it regulating the people that are conducting illegal acts? Or is it just regulating more of the people that follow the rules to begin with?
I mean, we can attribute like laws to any topic, not just guns. I mean, gun laws regulate the law-abiding citizen. They do not regulate the criminal. The criminal is going to still have the guns, no matter what firearm law you have in place. The criminal is still going to cross the border no matter what type of international treaty or law you have in place, right? Unless you have individuals securing the border, unless you have individuals that can properly defend themselves against criminals. Like Texas is a prime example of what a state that stands by its citizens to protect themselves in such an event. I mean, there are thousands of examples every year in Texas where a armed citizen deters a crime.
Right, absolutely. I mean, that's on a daily basis. Plus, we have mutual combat laws here as well, which allows for individuals to fight if need be without any kind of repercussion. Which honestly, they need to bring back everywhere, because honestly, a lot of these people that like to puff up on the internet, that would stop. So, but I mean, when it comes to the federal laws and coming in place, there's a lot of overreach in regards to a lot of different laws, but I guess it's one of those issues that we see on a daily basis where people today seem to gravitate to wanting the government to step in more and more, but then simultaneously wanting them to step back. I mean, is that just, I don't know. To me, it just seems like that's kind of counterproductive.
It's so what it is, it's like a child with a security blanket. You have all the freedoms of making your own decisions, but you want your parent there when you get in trouble. Right.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
people look at the government like daddy government. They want the government to provide for them, but they don't really want to follow all of the government regulations in regards to those things that the government provides.
I mean, even the Second Amendment was created not for like individuals to protect themselves against another individual, even though that it was implied, but it was initially written so that way they could defend themselves against tyrannical governments, correct?
That's correct. It actually states that in the Declaration of Independence, which was essentially our statement to Britain that we've had enough. This is what we're going to do. And actually within that document, it's actually a very, if anybody's ever seen the movie National Treasure, it's one of my favorite lines that Nicolas Cage recites. Basically, when the bands of government become tyrannical, it is our responsibility to take action.
Right. And like for instance, like this is a hot topic and it might be controversial when in reality, I don't see how it is. But I mean, we can go back to January 6th. It's one of those topics that the left likes to bring up all the time. But in all reality, when you look at the Constitution, and I'll correct me if I'm wrong, because you're a little bit more versed in it, but when I read it, what they did that day was not illegal. It was within their constitutional right to do what they did because they felt as though that they were being taken over by a tyrannical government. Am I not correct?
You're correct. And when we talk about the First Amendment, the First Amendment is not you have some free speech. The First Amendment is 100% free speech. And the First Amendment also says if you have grievances, you can redress those grievances. And the Capitol building, that's our building. That is where we peacefully protest. We bring our grievances to those that we have entrusted power to. We are the trustees, right?
Right.
We entrust these individuals with a certain level of authority to represent our needs, our values. And there was a large group of individuals that felt that their needs weren't being addressed.
And, a lot of people will take that portion of the Constitution and they'll conflate it together with, peacefully protest versus rioting and taking it, going up against the government. When in reality, they're separate. What happened on January 6th was not a protest. They were, whether or not you agree with it or not, because there's plenty of Republicans that don't agree with what they did on that day, but it doesn't matter what you think. It's what they thought. They were within their constitutional right because they felt that they were being taken over by a tyrannical government, and they went in with force and tried to overthrow, right? That's what they claim. Let's put it that way. We'll put it that way. But in all reality, I don't think that that's what they were trying to do. I think, but whether or not they actually went in there with weapons to try and actually overthrow what they felt was a tyrannical government is not the same as them peacefully protesting. And that's okay because they're not the same, but they're fully within their constitutional right to do so. Again, whether or not you agree with it or not, or you thought it was an insurrection, doesn't matter. If it went against your beliefs of what the Constitution or what happened in the election, does not matter. They felt it. They were taking up their constitutional right to do so.
And so I'm of the mindset, and I side with the Supreme Court on this because of their understanding of the 14th Amendment. They determined that incident was not an insurrection. And when we look at the 14th Amendment, Section 3, there are specific necessities that need to take place for something to be labeled an insurrection. And that is determined and explained in USB PAL 1871, not to be confused with the USB PAL 1871 that covers distillery. So make sure if you're going to search up a USB PAL 1871, maybe add a keyword insurrection.
But honestly, I mean, I don't know. I'm probably going to get clipped for this, but I honestly don't see what's wrong with an insurrection because our Constitution gives us the right to do so. Because if they feel, regardless of what your feelings are or what your beliefs are, if a group of people feel that their government is being tyrannical, they have the right to do it.
Well, think about it this way. Our founders, wise men, young men, younger than you and I, they started an insurrection against Britain. They fought against the government. And with that, because they felt their needs were not being addressed, they felt they were being taken advantage of. And all because of 2% T-tax? 3% T-tax. Taxation without representation. Now we're having, a lot of incidents regarding the election currently already. And
multiple on that.
Our needs are not being met. Our demands are not being met. We demand fair and free elections. We demand transparency within the media. We demand that the people that we trust with authority and power and responsibility meet our needs, not line their inner pockets.
Absolutely. And that it goes into the area of like the government thinking that they have control over us versus the states having control over them. And in all reality, that is the way it is because we are a collection of nation states, which a lot of people don't want to recognize. We are individual nation states that came together, just kind of like the UK. They call themselves individuals. It's the same thing when you look at the founding documents of each state itself. But then you get to the point where we're at today, where the government is changing things at a federal level without the will or say of the people of the individual states. And that's where it comes into play, where things like the Department of Defense Directive 5250.01 comes into play. And a lot of people will not understand what that is. But in all reality, it's a very scary thing. Mike, you've got that, right?
Yeah, I got it right here. I'll show you right now. So we're going to look that up right here. So I'll show the title real quick, and then we'll come back to this very important detail. So this is DOD Directive 5240.01, DOD Intelligence and Intelligence-Related Activities and Defense Intelligence Component Assistance to Law Enforcement Agencies and Other Civil Authorities. So basically what this does is, under the authorization of the Secretary of Defense, it allows the United States military, to assist any form of law enforcement in regards to deterring or diffusing or ceasing any type of civil disruption.
Now, why is this a big deal? Like, what does it change?
So I'm about to get in that when we jump to page 13, and it is honestly terrifying to me as a former member of the military. And when you get down here, this is page 13, levels of authority, and you'll see right here, Secretary of Defense approval. And I have highlighted these words: lethality, lethal force. So remember, I said that under the authorization of the Secretary of Defense, military can be used by law enforcement, local, state, federal, to diffuse any type of civil disturbances. Okay, so if we look at subsection Charlie under paragraph 2, assistance in responding with assets with potential for lethality, or in any situation in which it is reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death or serious bodily injury. So when we look at that, this is what's so terrifying. Never in United States military or United States history, in the 250 years this nation has existed, never has the United States military been authorized to use lethal force against United States citizens.
Right, and that is because of I know I'm going to probably slaughter this because I can never pronounce Latin words, but posse comitatus. I'm not sure if you have that or not, but I mean, you can explain it a little bit, right?
So basically, this changes everything. This DOD directive changes everything. It allows the military to operate on U.S. soil. That's wrong.
Which up until this was issued was illegal.
September 27th, 2024, right under your noses.
So so here we are again, showing that the government is inching little by little, taking away our freedoms to the point where it's going to get to the point of where, we like to call ourselves, you guys like to call us conspiracy theorists, but it's getting to the point where they're going to want to be an authoritarian government, making decisions without the say of the people, essentially eliminating the first 10 amendments of our Constitution. And you can sit here, you call us, all the names that you want in regards to conspiracy theorists and whatnot, but little by little, we continuously show you how they're just chipping away because of the Constitution and because of the first 10 amendments. They can't do it overnight, or else they would have already. But that's the great thing about our Constitution, is that we are continuously having to fight against things. And that's why there's legal battles going on all of the time.
Yeah. So the Posse Comitatus Act, it limited, it restricted the United States president from utilizing the military as a police force.
Mm-hmm.
That's 𝗬𝗡𝗡𝗘𝗧𝗧 Act in a nutshell. And this DOD directive basically goes, wah, wah.
Right. And to put that in perspective, 𝗬𝗡𝗡𝗡𝗘𝗧 Act has been in place since 1878. So they've retroactively changed something that's been in place for 100, what is that, 150 years almost?
Yes. So, and Robert Kennedy actually talked about this, I think last week. He spoke about this very DOD directive that was released. And unfortunately, I don't have the video. But the fact that they don't even define what a civil disturbance is, and I'm all about definitions. And it's not Oxford Dictionary definitions. It's not Webster's dictionary definitions. It is legal definitions. And the fact that they do not define civil disturbance means that they can equate a civil disturbance to a protest.
Anything they want. And that's the problem with most of the legislation coming out of Congress nowadays too, is that the language is so ambiguous. We can't really determine whether or not, this is going against our constitutional right or not. Because they can just make up whatever they want. And
what really irks me is people are so banged up about the presidential election, but the most important elections in my eyes are the congressional.
Absolutely.
Those are the people that are handling your future. Those are the people that you have trusted at the state and federal level with your money.
Right. It's not even, and that was just about to say, when it comes to the fiscal responsibilities and just how your everyday is affected by law, will come down from the federal level, which is Congress. That's why we say stop hyper focusing on what the presidential race. Start looking into not only the Congress itself, but also your individual. Who's your sheriff, who's your board of trustees, who's your governor. All of those things will affect you, but most importantly, Congress, because they have more power than the president, and people don't realize that. And how I can determine that is the fact that even if the president vetoes a new law or whatnot, they can override him with a 2/3 majority. And it has been done before.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's supposed to be a delicate balance of power. And each branch they have checks on each other. So the president cannot pass laws, cannot legislate. Right? In the executive branch, he can pass executive orders as long as they are in line with the Constitution and his duties dictated by Article 2 of the United States Constitution. And he is in charge of national security and foreign relations. That's the president in a nutshell. The legislative branch handles majority of everything else. The judicial branch just makes sure it's constitutional.
Basically.
And y'all, not everybody, but majority of a certain side are so concerned with the people that are looking at the Constitution and saying this is right or this isn't right, and they're not looking at the people writing the bills. You want to put term limits on judges and a president, but you don't want to put term limits on representatives and senators.
Right. And I just wanted to go into it, but I can't for the life of me remember it. And I know you will, where the Supreme Court overturned the specific, I don't even know if it was an act or a bill that caused these individual agencies in the executive branch to be able to basically interpret however the law in which they want so that they can operate. Chevron difference. Yes, there we go. So that is actually that is a good thing for America. The overturning of that is a good thing because that allows these three-letter agencies, not allow them, I should say, to just interpret the law in any way that they like to then proceed with however they want to act. It makes it to where they have to follow the legislation in regards to their operations that's pushed out by Congress to a T. There is no interpretation for them, so that way they can just act in any old way that they want.
Mm-hmm. Well, so it is absolutely unconstitutional for any branch of government to grant itself power, which I have a challenge for everybody. I want you to look through every amendment to the Constitution and see which ones have a section where it says Congress shall have the power to appropriate this legislation, or in some praise of that meaning. Congress shall have the power to appropriate this legislation, right? That is Congress granting itself power. See, look how many amendments have that exact writing. Congress shall have power.
I know the answer.
So, and then another overreach of power is, before the Chevron deference was decided, is these multiple arms of the executive branch having some type of authority to govern people, to write their own laws that decide what the people should and shouldn't do. That's outside their power, dictated by Article 2.
And this happens a lot. And one of the major things that's actually going to be happening, I believe the exact date is May 7th of 2025. There's a new rule or law going into place where people have to have a real ID and I'm talking real ID as an actual term. It's not like have an actual real ID, but real ID is a very specific type of ID in order just to travel within the United States. The problem, though, that I'm having with this is that, first of all, you don't have the right to infringe on my ability to travel within the states.
Your real ID will have a itty bitty little star right there at the corner, signifying that it's a real ID.
Right. And what they're doing is they're initiating this so that way you can't even get through TSA without having that form of ID. But the problem with these IDs, there's a couple of them. However, to get back to what I was saying, the Constitution's very clear that we have the right to travel from state to state, from state to state unencumbered. But the thing is that they're slowly. People are like, "Oh, this isn't a big deal. I can get an ID. A lot of them already have them. Blah blah blah." That's fine and all, but to require somebody that already has a valid driver's license and whatnot that they can present to TSA, you're making it one step harder for them to have to go and buy a new ID. First of all, you're not just providing it for free. We have to go buy it, and for us to travel within the United States, that's an infringement on our constitutional right. But the problem with the Real ID Act is a Real ID is a threat to privacy. Real ID threatens privacy in two ways. First, it consolidates Americans' personal information into a network of interlinking databases, access to the federal government and bureaucrats throughout all of the states and the territories. This is a national mega database. Would invite government into snooping and getting a gold mine of identity, which would also then allow people, because everybody's trying to steal your information. It allows people that are trying to steal identities. It's a gold mine of just like, hey, let me get past this firewall, because we know it happens all the time. And that way, it's just they're making it easier for them. But it also, in second, it mandates all driver's license and ID cards have an encrypted machine readable zone that would contain personal information on Americans that could be easily schemed by anybody with the barcode reader. Because we're seeing it nowadays where people are attaching barcode readers to even the card readers when you go into the gas stations. So if somebody just walks past you, they can get access to all of your information just from that card, and people will sit here and say, oh, well, they're going to have safeguards of that. Like, they don't have safeguards now, though. People's information are being stolen on a daily basis.
I'm going to put my liberal progressive hat on real quick. I thought we didn't like IDs I thought identification cards such as these would harm the minority demographics in this country, the lower class, if you will. How are individuals supposed, how are these lower class individuals supposed to afford these IDs? Like, we don't even agree on IDs to vote, and now you want them to have these special, expensive, because I just got one, expensive IDs to travel?
Mm-hmm. And I
Seems a little
I was just
hypocritical.
talking about, you just said expensive, and that's another thing. That, I mean, it's going to create a bureaucratic nightmare from two different angles. Is the fact, like, for instance, in New York, they have to pay for the real ID through higher fees and bureaucratic hassles, in addition to slowing the long lines and the technical itches and all of that stuff that we already see at DMVs and ID issue. I know from state to state they call it something different, but everybody knows a DMV, whatever your state is when it comes to the DMV, we already have hours long lines and things of that nature that we have to deal with. Now everybody has to go back, first of all, pay for it. You know, they're requiring us to pay for something that we really honestly don't need because we already have a functioning system. But now we have to wait in these ridiculously long lines that are only going to get worse.
You know what this is? This is the start of a database that could be connected to a registry for something in our Bill of Rights. Maybe I'm putting my QAnon hat a little too tight, but they've wanted a registry for a long time. And what better way to do it than, mandate that you must have a specific ID in order to travel domestically?
Right.
But yeah, I think this is totally hypocritical to mandate this for travel. Liberty. So liberty is a fundamental, inalienable right dictated by not just the Declaration of Independence, but also the United States Constitution. Right. You do not need any type of identification to travel.
And yeah, I mean, we want to sit here, we want to talk about immigration like we did just a couple episodes ago. What do you think that this is going to do for them? And the whole issue of trying to like, we're sitting here trying to figure out who's all in our country now. And then you want to sit here, you want to talk about, oh, well, ICE and all this other stuff from a liberal standpoint. What do you think this is going to do to those that are here trying to seek asylum?
Well, I foresee it. I've called a lot of things, Nate. And we were just talking about it moments ago. I've called a very big thing that's being talked about on several news networks as far as predictions. I'm going to make a prediction right now.
Well, hang on. What is it? The prediction about the election?
Not that one. Not
okay. So, all right. I want to save that for our episode.
So that I'm not going to go into that one. But my new prediction in regards to the real ID, there is a payment issue. What I think is going to happen is there's going to be legislation issued. I'm going to say by the state of either an individual from California, Connecticut, or New York that is going to pay for illegal aliens to get these real IDs.
Absolutely. I mean, why not? They're already getting money for all the other stuff that we went into in the other episode.
October 28, 2024 at 7:33 Central Time. I made my prediction. We'll see.
Go.
I'm making a note of it now. Everybody's stealing my stuff.
I know, like your prediction about the election that you told me a couple months ago. A lot of people are starting to say it. So tune in, though. On Monday, we're going to definitely be doing that. So as we wrap up here, we're going to, on Friday, I want you guys to tune in at 6 p.m. And that is when our live will go live. Now, we're going to be going into Agenda 47 and talking about a little bit, what you need to know or want to know about Trump's policies. I know a lot of people, like I said earlier, a lot of people have been asking us about the tariffs and whatnot and how that can be implemented. Is that going to cost more on the American dollar for us to go buy groceries and whatnot? We'll get into all of that. But then also on Monday at 7 p.m. Central Time, we have a special Election Eve prediction, and special guests that are going to be joining us. And you definitely want to tune in for that because they are from all over the country, first of all. So you're going to get a lot of different perspectives and you're going to be able to hear what their predictions are as well.
And they're not all Republicans.
Oh, one is actually a libertarian.
Yep. So I'm excited for that. And one little thing before we go. Michael, Jamie, and Sarah, if you're watching this, Daddy loves you. Now go to bed. And if you're not following us already, be sure to follow the Legislative Lounge on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Rumble, Twitch, and Patreon. We love you. Have a good night.